Hi guys, welcome to our first lesson on our new unit. So this unit is looking at nationalism and unionism in Ireland between the years of 1911 to 1923. So it's quite a big unit. We're covering a lot of important topics here. We're covering the 1916 Rising, we're covering the War of Independence, the Anglo-Irish Treaty of 1921, and the Civil War. So there's an awful lot going on in this unit. So it's going to be quite a long unit. We're going to spend 5-6 weeks on this. Today we're looking at the concept of nationalism and unionism. Okay, we've come across these topics before when we looked at 1798. We want to just revise what those topics are and look at them in the context of the early 20th century. What did nationalism and unionism mean at the time? It's really, really important to understand these two concepts in order to get the entire point of this unit. These are the two governing concepts of a lot of what's going on. So just to start off, thinking back, we looked at nationalism and unionism before when we looked at the 1798 rebellion. It came up a little bit then when we looked at parliamentary figures. So we looked at O'Connell and we looked at Parnell as well. So we've definitely talked about these concepts before. So what I want you to do, and you just have to think about this, you don't need to write it down anywhere. Okay, you can do it in your head, or if you prefer to write it down, of course, do. But what I want you to do is there are 7 people or organizations mentioned here on the left hand side. We have Daniel O'Connell, we have Wolfe Tone, we have the Protestant Ascendancy, Robert Peel, Charles Stewart Parnell, the IRB, and the Orange Order. And for each of them, I want you to decide, do they belong under the idea of nationalist? Are they nationalist people or organizations, or are they more belonging to unionist groupings? Okay, so pause here for a few minutes. Think about each of them. Can you place them in the correct place? And when you've made your decisions, then you can press to continue with the video. Okay, so if we go through them then really quickly, Daniel O'Connell, we would say, is under the nationalist ideas. Now, O'Connell did go to Parliament in Britain and sat in Westminster, but we know that he was very much fighting for Irish rights, and he was trying to get the Act of Union repealed. We had the repeal movement before his death. He wasn't successful in achieving it, but it was definitely a big part of his movement. So Daniel O'Connell under nationalist. Wolfe Tone also under nationalist, led a rebellion. The difference here obviously being O'Connell being peaceful, being parliamentary means, Wolfe Tone being physical force, but both being nationalist. They both want greater Irish independence from Britain. The Protestant Ascendancy, we would expect them to be unionist. They generally want to keep links with Britain because it's of a huge financial and power benefit to them. Robert Peel, if you don't remember who he is British Prime Minister, so we would assume he is definitely Unionist. Charles Stewart Parnell, who led the Home Rule Party, or was a major player in the Home Rule Party at least, would be under the Nationalist side. Okay, definitely Nationalist. The IRB, absolutely Nationalist. We're going to talk a bit more about the IRB in a few minutes. And the Orange Order, so you remember the Orange Order from the whole way back when we looked at the Ulster Plantation. They were established, but also, we talked about them a little bit in the Ulster Plantation about the ideas of what was coming about, and then they were established around the time of 1790, just after 1798 rebellion, and the Orange Order would definitely be a unionist organisation. So just to just keep in your mind that when we look at Irish history, these concepts are always coming up. So objectives today is understand the ideas of nationalism and unionism in the context of the early 20th century, be aware of the different stances within Irish nationalism, and know about some of the leaders of unionism at this time. So to start off, the first thing we're going to do is just look at nationalism. So what I want you to do is I want you to read through the booklet. So when you open up the booklet for this topic, you're going to see the first page and a half is all about what we're discussing today. So you read the first page and you'll see down the first there's 2 bullet points, one about the IBB and one about Sinn Féin. And that's going to give you a lot of the information, and I'm going to go through some of the information here as well. So use both this video and the booklet before answering these questions. Make sure you do not go trying to Google any answers, okay, because this is very specific what we're talking about here. Google will give you general answers and not going to be the answers that I'm looking for. So make sure you're using the information in this video and in the booklet. And what I want to know is, what was the difference between nationalism and republicanism? What does IPP stand for, and what is this group also known as? Which of the groups mentioned had republican aims in the first decade of the 20th century? What political party did most nationalists support in the first decade of the 20th century? So that's 1900 1910. And who founded Sinn Féin, and what year was it founded? So, if we look at nationalism is this idea of getting greater independence for Ireland, having Ireland being a self-ruling country. We know that with the Act of Union in 1800-1801, that the island of Ireland had been taken under direct control from Westminster and London. So before that, we did have a parliament within Ireland to deal with internal concerns of Ireland, and it was based in the buildings around College Green in Dublin. The Act of Union got rid of that parliament, and Irish politicians now had to go to Westminster to take their seats. A lot of Irish people very much disliked this. They didn't like that the concerns of Ireland were being dealt with so far away, and they didn't like the influence of British politicians on internal policies, because it was no longer a government just for Ireland. It was a government looking at all of Britain, all of the United Kingdom, so Ireland and all of Britain, and they didn't agree that this government had the best interests of Ireland in mind. And of course, we talked about when we got to the famine that this very much kind of proved our point almost, that the government of Britain was not connected with the lives of the everyday Irish people, and this was a reason for why all nationalists wanted a government within Ireland to rule Ireland. But there is different levels to what they wanted. So the first group we have is the IPP, the Irish Parliamentary Party. These are also known as the Home Rule Party. So we've actually come up with we've seen them before. This is the party that Isaac Butt founded and that Charles Stewart Parnell was a member of and a leading member of. The IPP are still around. Okay, they're still going. They continue going up well for the first 15-ish years of the 20th century. And basically what the IPP want is home rule, and home rule means that there is a government within Ireland to deal with the issues within Ireland, but they are not looking for true total independence from Britain. They still want the connection with Britain, that the government in Westminster would deal with foreign policy, external policy is what they call it at the time, and the King or Queen of Britain would remain the King or Queen of Ireland. So there's still a lot of connections in Home Rule. Home Rule is just about dealing with internal affairs. So you have a government within Ireland that deals with the issues of Ireland. Okay. Now, the members of the Home Rule Party were going to Parliament in Britain, and they were fighting for this all the time, and they just kept, arguing and putting forward their arguments. They had, before the 20th century, put forward their ideas twice. So their ideas went forward in the 1880s and again the 1890s. And both times their idea, their wish to get home rule for Ireland was knocked back and was told didn't go through. So in our next lesson, we're going to look at something called the Home Rule Crisis and how they nearly, in the 1912-1914 phase of time period, nearly got home rule. They didn't achieve it, but they got very, very close in that time period. Okay, but it's really important to understand who the IPP are. They are very much the most popular party of nationalists in Ireland at the time. Okay, the vast majority of nationalists in the country are supporting this idea of home rule. They're not looking for total independence. They're looking for a government within Dublin just to take care of internal affairs, but there would still be a lot of connections with Britain. They would still have the King or Queen, and we would still have Britain dealing with most foreign policy. Now, some people did, however, disagree with this, and that's where our next group comes about. And the next group we have is Sinn Féin. And Sinn Féin was founded in 1905, so it's a very, very old political party. And it was founded by a man named Arthur Griffith. Okay, and Griffith founded the party because he disagreed with some of the methods of the IPP. Now, he didn't totally disagree, didn't totally disagree with everything, okay? And when we think about Sinn Féin at this time, it's very, very different to the Sinn Féin that we know nowadays. Okay, there's a huge, huge difference between Sinn Féin as it was founded in 1905 and even how it existed 10 years later. Within those 10 years, it totally changes. So Sinn Féin, when it's first founded by Arthur Griffith, they are not looking for a total republic. What they're looking for is very similar to Home Rule. They want a government within Ireland to deal with Irish issues. They want Ireland to have control over trade and taxation so that Ireland can tax goods coming into Ireland, and that will help to fund the Irish government and Irish economy. They are very, very interested in the Irish industry and the Irish economy. They think that this is totally failing, and they want the power to deal with this, and they will get that through trade and taxation. The biggest difference we know that we can point to between the IPP and Sinn Féin is that Sinn Féin practiced what's called parliamentary abstention. And what that means is that Sinn Féin didn't go to London. Right? If they got a seat, if they got elected to be a member of Parliament, they said, okay, I'm not going over there. I'm going to do what I can here in Ireland, but I'm not going to waste my time going over to Britain because I don't think it's going to work. So the big difference here is the IPP, the Home Rule Party, is going over to London and taking their seats and arguing over there. Sinn Féin are refusing to go. A bit more strong in what they want for Ireland as well. They're a little bit more, asking for a little bit more. Really important to understand. If we look at, say, the time of around 1910 or so, Sinn Féin is not a popular party in Ireland. Okay, they're very young, obviously, and they're growing. Okay, and they're gaining a bit of support. But the vast, vast majority of nationalists in Ireland are supporting Home Rule. The third group we have then, and this is a group we've talked about before, I've mentioned them a few times, and this is a very much a secret organisation, and this is a physical force group, and that's the IRB, so the Irish Republican Brotherhood. And the IRB were the most ardently nationalist and what we call republicans. Okay, so republicanism is a type of nationalism, but it's asking for something. They're asking for a completely independent country. So what the IRB want is they want Ireland to be a totally independent country. There is absolutely no connection with Britain, so get rid of the king. There would be no king or queen. There would be no connections with Westminster. Ireland would be a republic, quite similar to what we have today. A big difference here being that they want the whole island. Okay, so the ideas that they have would be quite similar to the ideas of the IRA at later times, and the IRB are willing to use physical force. They believe that physical force and violence is the way to go about getting this. Okay, the way to achieve the republic that they want. So very much, the furthest end of nationalism, the most ardently a nationalist group of these, okay, and they want a total republic. They want Irish government, Irish president, no connection with the king or queen, no connection with the British Parliament whatsoever. Okay, so three different groups, they all fall under nationalism. So when we talk about nationalism, all three of these groups will be included within there. Okay, but as you can see, there are differences between each of them. The IRB, again, it's not a political party, it's a secret, violent organisation, okay, and it's kept, it's very prevalent in Irish life. There's a huge membership of it, and they are very much, people know, a lot of people are members, and a lot of people know who's members, but the idea is that it's a secret organisation, the government doesn't know who's involved in it, and it's doing violent acts in order to achieve its aims. Okay, so quite a lot of information there about nationalism at the time. What I want you to do now is to pause the video, answer those 5 questions at the side, and you're going to submit them on Teams in a few minutes. Okay, now we do have a little bit more work, so don't submit before you restart, just answer the questions, and then when you finish that you can restart the video. Okay, so that's nationalism. On the other side we have unionism. Unionism, I'm not going to talk quite as much about unionism because it's not quite as complex in terms of what we need to know. Unionism is the opposite side. So nationalists want Irish independence, unionists want links with Britain. And that's what they have at the turn of the 20th century. Ireland, the entire island, is ruled directly from Westminster. And unionists want this to stay that way. They like this. They believe in this. The majority of these unionists are based up in the northeast of the country around the Belfast area, and this is one of the reasons why that area is now has become Northern Ireland and is still part of the United Kingdom. The majority of unionists are based up there, but they want the entire island. Not all unionists up there. There are still unionists around the rest of the country, but these people want all of Ireland to be remain the way it is under the direct rule of Britain. They believe that's the best economic policy for the country, and they believe that is where the country should be. So for us now living in the Republic of Ireland in modern days, we tend to not very much agree with this idea of unionism, but for these men at the time, this is what they believed was best, and it is important to have a bit of historical empathy here and not totally villainize these people. We don't have to particularly like them, but you should try to appreciate where they're coming from. The two men who led this were a man named Edward Carson and James Craig. So that's Carson there standing up giving a speech in the picture there. These men led the group for a long time, and they very much wanted the entire island to stay the same. Now we're going to hear these. The reason I mention them now is because we're going to hear both these names a few more times as we go along. So you just need to know Edward Carson and James Craig. When Ireland does get partitioned, which we'll look at in about a few weeks' time in 1920, these men don't particularly agree with it. Carson in particular doesn't agree with partitioning Ireland. He doesn't want Ireland split up. He wants all of Ireland to remain part of Britain. Okay? And these men will be supported in their views by the Lord Lieutenant. So Lord Lieutenant is the King or Queen's representative in Ireland. So within Ireland, there was always someone there to represent the King or Queen in discussions and what was going on. And this person was actually lived mainly in Dublin Castle. That's where they resided. Oris on Uachtaráin, the current president's house, was originally built for the Lord Lieutenant as a summer residence. So Lord Lieutenant was a very important person in terms of unionism and giving legitimacy to unionism because they are representative of the King or Queen. So again, that's pretty much all I want to say about unionism. So those two concepts, nationalism and unionism, you need to have a really good understanding of these two. Okay, if you're any way confused about these two terms, please do let me know so we can discuss it further and we can come to a good understanding. Okay, but you're not going to, you're going to struggle with this unit if we don't have a very clear understanding. So make sure you read through the booklet about this as well. Okay. Alright, thanks for listening, guys. Make sure the questions on nationalism and these questions on unionism are both submitted on Teams before the end of the day. And thank you.